11:01, and time is precious. I want to thank all of you who are willing to give me an hour of your time to learn a little thing about AI. So I want to welcome everybody back. My name is Marty King, and this session is the second of our AI evolution series, AI Organizational Readiness. And if you were with me about 2 weeks ago in session one, we laid out the deployment gap where about 88% of organizations have deployed AI, but around 7 to 5% of them have actually scaled it and seen some meaningful results of that effort, right? So that 81 to 83% gap, those two numbers are the most expensive piece of the math in the mid-market business right now. And today we're going to go one layer deeper and explain the reasons why and ways to mitigate those issues as you're deploying AI. We're going to answer the question session one raised and didn't resolve, and that separates the 7% or 5% from the 88%. And the answer lives inside a simple formula. And that formula is what we're here to unpack over the next 45 minutes or so. My hope is to finish within 45 minutes and then have some Q&A where I can answer some of your questions. But before we start, we're going to do a quick recap of where we are in the series. So we have 4 sessions, 1 framework. Session 1 was the deployment gap. And today is session 2, the organizational readiness. Session 3 is AI maturity journey, where we go deep on the tool user through the thought partner to co-intelligence progression at the individual level. And session 4 is your AI evolution roadmap, where everything comes together into a plan that you can take back to your organization or your leadership team. Each session builds upon the last, but if you miss one, don't fret. This one, they all kind of work independently. You can go back to a YouTube channel where we have all of these recorded, and you can watch it at your leisure, and we'll send out a link after this session. Full 4-session arc is what gives you the clearest picture of where you are with your organization, where you actually sit today, and where you need to go, and what are the next steps. So before we get started, a little couple of 30 seconds or so on me. Anybody new to the series, my name is Marty King. I'm a 6-time founder of consulting organizations. AIX is my 6th endeavor. And I've spent about 30 years or so in the consulting business, consulting to Fortune 1000 companies on strategy, development, management, and execution, all with mission critical initiatives, digital transformation, and such. I've either created or led organizations responsible for over $1 billion worth of IT initiatives throughout my career. And my last firm was Gurney Consulting. We were able to scale that with AI to become one of Atlassian's fastest growing partners during the pandemic. It actually started during the Great Recession, powered through the pandemic, earned Inc. 5000 recognition 3 times in a row, and we were able to exit in 2023. And during that exit, I was able to use AI as my virtual investment banker and due diligence partner as we're evaluating potential partners to sell to. So I've had about personally over 5 years experience with AI. Gurney Consulting had about 3 years of AI consulting before we sold that in 2023. I founded AIX after that exit to do one thing, and that is to help mid-market CEOs close that deployment gap we discussed 2 weeks ago and turn their AI investment into something that is a compounding asset. And it's with that lens that I'm bringing everything you hear today. So let's start off with a little history. This is a kind of recurring theme with these events, but it's really, look at history. There are lessons to be learned, and it's almost like it's repeating itself. So we have an interesting here. Back in May of 1997, IBM's Deep Blue defeated Gary Kasparov, who was in a 6-game match in New York City. And Gary was the greatest human player of his generation. And he lost to a $10 million machine that could calculate 200 million positions per second. Every headline the next morning said the same thing. Chess was solved. The humans were cooked. The domain of pure intelligence has been seceded to Silicon, the machine, and most observers expected Kasparov to retire. But in fact, he did something completely different and strange, at the time considered strange. Now it's considered revolutionary, and it's a lesson to be learned. He started studying what humans plus machines could do that neither one of them could do on their own. And he created a whole new format of chess called advanced chess. So fast forward 8 years, and in June 2005, an online site called paychess.com hosted a freestyle tournament where there was over $132,000 in prize money to be won. The rules were very simple. Any combination of human and machines can compete. Grandmasters running multi-engine machine setups would just simply have to pay a fee, line up, and claim the prize. And the result was supposed to be pretty predictable. And it wasn't. In fact, the winners were actually two amateurs from New Hampshire, believe it or not, New Hampshire. So you had grandmaster chess players coming to play by themselves. You had them paired up with multi-million state-of-the-art machines. You had machines just running autonomously. And here you have two amateurs from New Hampshire, Zachary Stephen, a database administrator who himself was ranked number 1,381, and his buddy, Steve Crammon, a soccer coach and a snowboard instructor, he was ranked 1,685. Now, a grandmaster against either one of them would have won 99 out of 100 times, but they ran four simple chess engines that you could buy off the shelf with machines that they bought at the time, probably Best Buy or something like that. But what they had done was created a workflow between themselves and the machines and trained them to look at various aspects of the chessboard. And so when those moves were moving into the certain segments of the chessboard, they deferred to the machines and the algorithms to help guide them on their moves. And they had refined that over months. And what they had done was they wound up beating the grandmaster who was running one of these high-end machines at the end of the day. And so basically the conclusion was this. Kasparov drew a conclusion, what they call now Kasparov's law, where basically he called them weak. I will call them unique. The new version, the Marty King version of Kasparov's law, we'll call it King's law, that a unique human with a machine and a better process outperforms a strong computer alone. And it also outperforms a strong human with a machine with an inferior process. Three variables, one equation, take any of them to zero, and that formula collapses. And so that equation is the one your company is navigating right now with AI. And it's written, and it's basically our model is this chess notation in Kasparov's law. Let me explain. So it's a simple algebraic equation for exponential outcomes, right? You have people times AI multiplied by the process, and that is going to equal exponential outcomes. Three factors, one multiplication. Every element has to be present, and every element has to be built to depth, or the equation doesn't work. So let me walk you through each piece. People times AI is the co-intelligence capability, and we're going to talk about that in some future slides here and going deep in the next session of the AI maturity model. But this is the state where your workforce and AI are working together at a level where the output exceeds what either one could produce on their own, right? We'll spend most of our time on this today because this is where the methodology places its biggest bet. The process is the multiplier on top. This is where the new capability meets the actual operations of your business. And what I want to be precise about what process means here. Process doesn't mean taking your existing workflows and bolting AI on top of them. That approach has a name in the methodology, and we call it paving the cow paths, right? The process means rebuilding the assembly line to exploit what AI, along with your people, are able to produce and what make possible. The outcome on the right side of the equation is what we call the breakthrough goal. It's a 12 to 24-month target that delivers 25% or more step change and improvement and a capability that actually matters to your business. This is not that we're kind of doing away with this mini incremental, that's fine, but we're talking about when you get to this level, a step change in capabilities and outcomes. So the resource allocation at the bottom of this slide is a 50-20-30 rule. 50% of your efforts should be focused on your people. Your most valuable asset within your organization are your people. We're focusing 50% of the equation on that. 20%, 30% on process design and 20% on technology or AI. That allocate is what separates organizations across the deployment gap from organizations that kind of stay stuck, right? And what we call purgatory. So a lot of executives that I talk to see this allocation and they get uncomfortable because the instinct flip this, right? 50% on technology. A lot of the effort gets on the shiny object, the shiny tool, 20% on people. So today we're going to walk through the data that tells you why that instinct produces the exact failure pattern that we're seeing in the market today and what you want to avoid. So we look at this, right? It's multiplicative. It's a multiplicative engine, and why the technology alone guarantees poor results or failure or stagnation, right? The AI creation is a multiplication equation, not an addition equation, right? The multiplication inputs carry different weights, and the largest factor sets the ceiling and the smallest factor sets the floor, right? If any single aspect of this equation goes to zero, you're at zero. If it goes to one, you're at one. You haven't moved the needle at all, right? So it's very important that we pay equal attention to each part of this equation and heed the weights that we have assigned to them. And we will explain a little further, right? So we call them capacity dimensions. I hate to sound, academic and theoretical here, but here's where math works this way, right? In the multiplication relationship, the largest factor sets the ceiling, right? And the lowest one sits the floor. People carry 50% of the weight because people capacity sets the organizational ceiling. A workforce that can't absorb the technology, you won't get much from the technology. And I mean nothing, right? The license will sit, we've seen it, right? It becomes shelfware. The license go unused. The training fades within weeks. The pilot never scales, and the people capacity determines whether or not every dollar you spend on AI compounding result, or it sits on the balance sheet as a sunk cost. AI, the technology dimension, carries 20% of the weight because the frontier model choice is really singular and concentrated. You make it once, right? Not to say you're abdicating due diligence. Due diligence is crucial in making this one-time decision. And you're going to commit to this over multi years, right? It's a multi-year relationship that you're having with this tool and embedding it in ways that you've never embedded technology within your organization. So the 20% reflects the magnitude of that one decision. The remaining 80% is everything else that decision either enables or constrains. So your process now carries 30% because the process is that surface where the new capacity converts into actual business outcomes. So we're talking revenue, margin, time to market, your customer experience, processes where the multiplication shows up on the bottom line on your P&L. One more critical point before we go deeper. The three capacity dimensions are all assessed in parallel or at the levels in which make the most sense for you. It's supposed to be very flexible and organic. The one thing it isn't supposed to be is sequential, right? So you don't finish the people first and then start the technology, and you don't finish the technology and then start the process. All three get your attention at once at the proportions of the equation, at the proportions that all three of them have to be in place before you produce any value, right? Because we're talking about it being an algebraic equation where if any one of these is at a low number or heaven forbid a zero, you're going to receive zero. So here's the statement that sits at the heart of our methodology and our approach to AI, and it's the people dimension, right? Ultimately, people are your destiny. I'm lifting that up from the founder of the Top Gun Academy out in San Diego. We're using state-of-the-art dollar machines. It's super high levels under super stress. And basically, what it all comes down to is the simple truth that the people are your destiny. Because let's be frank about it, right? The models, they're available to everybody. You have OpenAI, you have Anthropic, you have Google, you have XAI, Grok, Elon Musk's company. Guess what? Your competitors have the same access to the tools you do. Your capital-rich incumbents have access to them. Your AI-fluent startups gunning for your market, they have access to them. Global firms, with resources you can't match, have access to them. The capability of your organization to structurally absorb these models is your only durable competitive advantage in this cycle. And that's the variable that decides your outcome. And everything else is pretty much commoditized. So let's let that sink in. Let that sink in. The work is going to continue. The work happen. One thing I want to make abundantly clear is that I think that, and I know that the mid-market and those who are in the Fortune 1000 are the ones that are going to reap the rewards of this technology. Because your incumbents, all the ones that I just mentioned, your incumbents, they have too much bureaucracy. They have too much technical debt, too much process debt to move nearly as quickly as you can, right? And your startups, they don't have the intellectual capital or the scale that you do, right? To be able to make a dent in the market as quickly as you can. So I firmly believe that the mid-market and the agile companies within the Fortune 1000s are the ones that are going to win the day. But it all comes down to the process that you employ and how you implement it within your organization. So let's take a look at this statistic here, right? The first line here is from the Global Human Capital Trends Report. Organizations that take a tech-first approach to AI are 1.6 times more likely to miss their ROI targets. Tech first means buying the tools first and then figuring out the people part later. And we're seeing that in the marketplace today, right? Really easy to get involved with the technology. You lay down a credit card, $20 a month. It's like a Netflix subscription. Boom, now you have access to AI, right? Super easy to get involved with. The second is from Boston Consulting Group and Columbia Business School's study that was published in 2025. And this was covered in the Harvard Business Review. And it stated that organizations that take an employee-centric approach to AI are 7 times more likely to achieve AI maturity. 7 times. With AI maturity, right, we go to that equation. If you're able to achieve that AI maturity, the human, your people, plus AI, and apply that to your processes to achieve exponential outcomes, that means you are 7 times more apt to reach there than your competition who haven't done anything at all or are going with a tech first approach. And what I've seen in the market and with some of our clients is that, in the 5 to 25% range, tracks to every organization that I walk into. It also tracks to the fact that, 1.6, the 1.6 problem that to look up exactly the way the research has predicted and actually shown and still happening. So, when we work with firms, it's kind of that instinct to go with the tech first, really kind of rework the sequence and the process equation employing for AI. So the human capability amplified by AI, creates the combined capacity required for exponential value. And organizations that lead with employee capability are 7 times more likely to reach that maturity. So everything we cover for the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to be building upon this insight. So here's the single most important data point for the people argument. AI raises the point times faster than it raises your ceiling. And this comes from a 2023 field study. It was a landmark study, and it's true today. It was run by Harvard Business School, Wharton, MIT, in collaboration with Boston Consulting Group. There was 758 elite consultants tasked closely with a task closely modeled to their work, and they were given ChatGPT 4 to execute the tasks. Realized was tasks were completed. They were finished and it produced an output that's more than 40% higher in quality. Amazing, right? Now those were the headline numbers, but that was very consequential. And this is it. High performers gained about quality and speed. The lower performers gained 43%. The lift on the floor was more than double the lift on the ceiling. So think about what that means for your organization. Your 60% players become 80% players. Your 80% players approach 100, and the variance compresses. Team level output rises faster than any individual gain because the whole distribution is moving up, right? A rising tide lifts all boats, and the bottom of the distribution is moving the fastest. So the population where leaders, their instinct is either try to augment or work around, elevates those people to the highest levels of performance. And that is what the Boston Consulting Group and the Harvard study has found. And this is the reason why we weigh 50% of the equation on the people formula. This is with us 2 weeks ago. We're talking about measuring the relationship with AI and not necessarily the skills, right? So how do we know where somebody actually sits in their AI capability? Our methodology uses 3 simple stages. And the critical insight is that we're measuring the relationships and the skills. Stage 1 is the tool user. right? And their internal dialogue is I use it to find things, right? They use it as Google on steroids. It's transactional in nature. 60% of the workforce uses AI in this fashion. Stage two is thought partner, the more advanced application of AI. And this was where the Boston Consulting Group consultants resided. They were in that thought partner stage where you're able to see those types of movement in productivity. And shockingly enough, your lower performing folks, once they establish the thought partner level and the skills associated with that, we're able to see that step change in performance. Right, this is where we get into context engineering, structured deliverables, where we direct, produce, it generates outcomes, we revise those and we refine those. Nirvana, or the ultimate point, I call it nirvana, the ultimate level is co-intelligence. And this is where not, what can you produce for me, but with AI, it's bi-directional. I'm taking my expertise, my experiences, my knowledge, and I'm marrying it with the power of AI and the machine learning. You put those two together and with synthesizing concepts and ideas, and we're emerging from this interaction, this flow state with outcomes that neither I could develop on my own and neither could AI, but you put us together and we're producing some exponential outcomes or insights that lead to ultimately breakthroughs with your organization. So these stages are all about the relationship, and the relationship determines the return. And in session three, we're going to go very deep in this model. But today, I just wanted to mention this and show you, provides context for talking about in the next slides. This is one slide you're going to see every single time we have an event together. Human agency is primal. It's primacy. AI, the amplifier, never the replacement. Never, right? The human is in the center of all of this. The human has the primacy. We do not let AI make strategic decisions for us. We let AI inform decisions with deep analysis. Human in the loop at every step. What happens is quality will collapse when users over rely on AI or abdicate responsibility or accountability to AI and stop thinking critically or reviewing those outputs. True amplification requires human discernment and involvement in the use of these tools. So there's two critical tests that we want to be asking ourselves as we go through this, as practitioners and as leaders of organizations. Co-intelligence. Can you and AI create insights together that neither of you could have created on your own? If the answer is yes, you are emerging and moving towards a state of co-intelligence. The intellectual capital test, right? We look at organizations, the intellectual capital of our organization. Are we amplifying that, right? The intellectual capital of our organization. If AI disappeared tomorrow, would you be more capable? Would your organization be more capable before you started or less? And if the answer is yes, you are amplifying your collective intelligence and your intellectual capital of your organization. If the answer is no, you're looking at dependency, and dependency equals atrophy, and atrophy, we all know what that means. It's not good. You're going backwards, right? So these tools, as powerful as they are, there are some risks and things that we need to consider as we're crafting these strategies. So the bridge to co-intelligence, right? How do we get from pilot purgatory to your exponential outcomes? We start with our individual capabilities, and this is where AI operates as the great leveler, right? We raise the floor 43%. The yield here is the reduction in the distance between your weakest and your strongest performers. The second layer is your organizational cohorts. This is where the 68% of the pragmatists, your majority activates through what we call peer attributed pilots. And what does that mean? That is basically simple as I'm Marty King and I'm in the accounting department and I have Sally across my hall in my cube, finishing her month-end reconciliations within minutes and the better part of the day. And I say, Sally, how the heck did you do that? And she says, well, Marty, I have taken up to learn AI and see how it applies to my function, within the organization. I'm building towards thought partner, and I'm moving in towards. I found out ways to use the tool, right, to produce some significant results for me, and result is the organization. I'm going to say, sign me up, right? It's going to be the Harry met Sally situation where you say, I want what she's having. right? So the peer attributed pilots, and we'll get into that in the next few slides, but here the yield is the systemic workforce adoption of it, right? So you're building up the momentum and you're getting that critical mass and that tipping point of the organization embracing these capabilities, right? So it's moving from your isolated fast movers and into the bloodstream of your organization. And then lastly, we have the third layer, and this is exponential capital, right? This is where the 50% people weight that's multiplied against the 20% AI, and the yield here ultimately is collective co-intelligence, right? And this is the exit from pilot pure purgatory and where the deployment gap is closed, where you create that bridge over that deployment gap and you're off to the promised land. We're talking about individual through that maturity model where they're getting to the point of collective intelligence as an individual. We're now talking about collective co-intelligence. The collective intelligence of your organization is now being augmented and amplified with widespread acceptance and application of AI. All right. So the path runs through all of these. You can't really skip a layer. And organizations that try to leap from the individual capability directly to exponential capital, they end up with a handful of power users and then a workforce that's going to be watching from the sidelines, right? It's crucial that you're spending 50% of your effort there, everyone underneath this tent. And when you do, we get to that collective co-intelligence where you have those exponential outcomes happening on a routine basis. We're talking 10x cognitive capabilities, 10x innovation velocity, and 10x process intelligence, right? We're talking about compounding the intellectual capital of your firm on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis, building and just getting stronger and stronger as you start hitting the flywheel. So let's talk about architecting this momentum, right? Each cohort has a myth attached to it. And the reality is that, contradicts that myth. And this is where AI evolutions, they get the sequencing wrong, right? So we have our fast movers. And the myth is that if you let them work in isolation, you'll just trust that they will produce. And the reality is that you need to formalize coalition to build use cases, right? Isolated lone wolf fast movers between lonely practitioners whose wins never cascade and never materialize, right? A formalized coalition now becomes the engine, right? A group of champions of the peer attributed evidence that the majority, the show me majority needs for them on the bus to get underneath that tent. Right. The next is the show me majority. The myth is that, training events, they'll drive adoption. Right? Just give them training, they'll figure it out. And I've seen millions of dollars are spent, and we all have seen millions of dollars spent on T initiatives, right? But it's amplified even more, and the stakes are even greater with AI, right? So you spend hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on this AI training programs that produce awareness, but zero behavior change. And the reality is that the peer attributed wins move the pragmatic majority more than any training will, right? It's that peer grouping. Right? Create an environment that fosters that and makes that visible. Evidence from people that they recognize, like, and trust is what is going to move them to act. And then lastly, we have the resistance, right? These are the people that, the myth is that, your AI strategy around them, you avoid them. This is the default of most leaders is like, okay, they're the lower end or they're the smaller population. But this is with AI, the most expensive mistake in the entire cohort model. And the reality is that you frame AI as a career multiplier for the deep expertise that they already carry. Right? We're going to get into this is that those who often resist AI and these types of initiatives are the ones who've been with you the longest. They have the institutional knowledge, they have the industry knowledge, they have the relationship knowledge and the relationship capital that often makes the world go round for your companies, right? So we have to get them underneath the tent because they are maybe 16 or 20% of your organization, but I would argue that they're probably one of the most critical that you need to be part of this. Right. And the Boston Consulting differential is the argument. The lower performing workers gain 43%. AI elevates those who most need the lift. Right. So with that message delivered, we need to get the people in the group, they need to hear it from someone that they trust and that they respect and is what's going to move them. So I think this one's going to be a little provocative and I might get some comments about this, but You go, because it's keeping it real here. And this is what the gradient looks across your workforce, right? The demographic reality contradicts, again, what leaders intuitively think what tech adoption, needs to be, or those assumptions of tech adoption. So let's take a look at the millennials, right? Your millennials, they're the 81 to 1996. They're demonstrating the highest usage, at around 58%. And the action is to deploy them as your coalition builders, right? Because right now they're in their mid 30s or so, maybe in the 30s, where they have AI application proficiency of any cohort at this point in time, and they become the bridge between experimentation and standard operating procedure, because they have digital natives. Right? They're taking to this technology. They see the promise of this technology and how it can apply to their careers and their lives. They have been around long enough where they have some critical institutional knowledge, industry knowledge that they can apply, right? So they have the perfect blend of both. And that's why we're saying, those folks, identify those folks, they're going to be in that fast mover category. And you want to grab them quickly and start coalescing their efforts and their energies and channeling those right into coalitions to start driving the rest of the organization. Let's take a look at Gen Z, right? High enthusiasm, right? And they're at 76% usage, right? So they're using the tools like crazy, right? And they're experimenting, and there's high energy around that. The reality is, right, they have a little bit less institutional knowledge and experience that is required to really drive the outcomes with, providing context and context framing and objectives and that sort of thing, right? So we need to provide the guardrails and the environment that's safe for them to experiment, right, and fail fast, and promote what's working for them. There's an interesting thing that's come out of the studies, and it says that Gen Z carries a real fear about AI replacing them. And so we need to frame AI as the thing that makes them more valuable, right? And involves them within. They make this culture and involves them more in this effort, and unlocks their participation. And then lastly, we have the baby boomers. I don't know why or how we got out of this without calling the Xers, but I'm lumping them up into the last category here. If we're baby boomers, they're using AI about 20% of the time. Texas, I frankly would have thought this would have been more, but it isn't. It's about 36% of the Gen Xers are using AI. Often it's this cohort, these two groups, that have the deepest expertise within your organization, right? And that's where the usage is looking at around 36 and respectively. And the action is to frame AI entirely as an expertise amplifier and a legacy extension, right? Your boomers, they've got a couple of more years left in with the organization. They certainly have a lot to contribute, right? And to have this kind of as the last hurrah within their career, and we have to frame it as such. And the outcome of this is you're unlocking all of that tacit institutional knowledge, tribal knowledge that are sitting in our heads, right? And we're able to extract that out and start to maybe encode that within the systems that we're building with AI. You know, there's other ways that we can get folks on intent completely, is maybe some of your Gen Z and with your Gen Xers and your baby boomers who might be a little bit more hesitant, right? You have that technical digital native aptitude married with the institutional knowledge and the emotional intelligence and all of the stuff that the old heads have, right? You put those together, and then that's the way you start building these coalitions and teams, and everybody working in and rowing in the same direction. So let's talk about the engine underneath the ecosystem, right? The frontier model of commits the organization to a multi-year trajectory. Now, we all know that we can buy these things, and even we can turn it on if you want. You pay by the month. With the organizations, you get into in price breaks and that sort of thing. Reality is, once you make this pick, and we're talking about establishing real, I mean, listen to the way we're talking about this, relationships with the technology and your people, right? Technology and the people relationship, and to decouple that, right? The switching costs associated with that can be significant. Okay. So a common assumption is that the AI risk means purchasing a multiple point solution for specific tasks, right? This is the other thing, is that there are a lot of tools for sale, and the AI tool for we have an AI tool for HR, we have an AI tool for finance. And that approach treats AI like a software category, and it produces a fragmented technology footprint with no real compounding value, right? And the reality is different. The frontier models that we're talking about, right? Your Claude, your Google, your OpenAI, your Chrome XAI, Mike, Meta's coming out. Those frontier models, those are the underlying engines. The point solutions are merely bodies wrapped around that engine. And when you pick a frontier model, you learn how to ride it directly, right? You learn how to ride that horse directly. And you'll capture the full capacity and capabilities of that engine, not within the construct of a spot solution. So when you buy those spot solutions, you capture whatever fraction of the engine that they're allowing you to have and choose to expose you to that, right? I was just in with a client last week, the law firm, one of the founders, and he's very, very proud to show me that he has 12 AI tools that he's using to run his day and his company. And they're all of these spot solutions. And I asked him, I said, how about these frontier models? Have you taken the time and energy to focus on those? And he hadn't, right? You can imagine that the exposure that he has and the cost that he has with these fractional solutions built upon these models. What I'm saying is you need to pick a frontier model and pick one with due diligence, fits your organization, and ride that horse, right? Um, let's see. The model selection requires alignment with your industry regulation, your data posture, and what you're looking to achieve as a breakthrough goal. And so the selection is very strategic and the stakes are multi-year. Right? We're going to talk about the compounding cost of might be a little bit here, right? The model is the selection is often irreversible once you're in and structurally expensive. Right? If we look doing is the founder of DeepSeek. He talks AI literacy as being progressive and binary, right? So it's not like you buy it and it's done. It's a progressive, as we're talking about a relationship. And so the selection is the beginning of a capability development relationship, right? So again, there's a lot of due diligence and alignment with where your company is and the strategic direction you're moving in that you need to account for this. And we get into customized paths and the absolute destinations, right? Organizational journey that has to be tailored to your organization, right? Your existing technology landscape, your cultural baseline, your risk appetite, all of those shape the specific sequence of the work, right? The destination is fixed, but all three dimensions of the equations, they have to be built to depth and the proportion that we require, that we're prescribing. So 50, 20, 30, people, technology, process. And some organizations will need to lead with urgent technology selection because of regulatory pressure that may force the timeline. Some will need to lead with deep psychological safety work because their culture has been beaten up by previous, IT initiatives. Some will need to lead with baselining because their existing operations aren't documented or not really, really legible. A lot of tribal and your processes aren't well defined. So again, the path is yours, but the equation has to stay the same, right? The proportions are absolute in our opinion, the 50, 20, 30. And so the third dimension in terms of process here, we're getting up on the 45-minute stage here. So we got a couple more to go, and then we'll open it up for questioning. The third dimension is the process, and the process where your outcomes actually emerge because the process is where the new capability meets the operations of your business, right? Process readiness has three stages. Stage one is process drift, undocumented tribal knowledge, right? Years of accumulated workarounds, silent dependencies, workflows that exist in the heads of the people who've been there the longest. Right? Many mid-market organizations are at this stage and they don't realize it until they try to transform something. They realize, oh shoot, right? We've had a lot of drift here and there's a lot of knowledge sitting in Marty's head, who's in the field of the baselining, right? Making existing operations like you can't redesign what you can't see. So baselining the work of making the current state visible so that systemic redesign becomes possible. And then stage three is systematic redesign. This is where the new capability converts into the financial performance or the company performance, revenue, margin, time to market, customer experience, the P&L impact the board will be asking for you year after year, quarter after quarter. So let's talk about to prevent the paving of cow paths, right? The process work and the methodology. We call it systemic parallel evaluation. It's the purpose is to prevent a single failure in the mid-market AI work, and that is paving the cow paths, right? Traditional digitizes existing flawed workflows. It preserves legacy inefficiencies in software, and it makes them harder to remove later, right? When you codify them in technology and technology, it makes it that much harder to remove. And with AI, I would argue even more. So that's the question, right? The question when you're paving the path, how can AI do this thing faster? Right. And that question produces incremental gains on workflows that should have been eliminated entirely. So we have to look at it as systematic redesign, right? A unified lens across people, technology, and process. Look at it systematically, not within silos, right? It eliminates processes made of AI. And it asks a question, and that is, what does this function need to be when our people are thinking with AI, right? When they're achieving that co-intelligence or high levels of thought, how does this fundamentally change, right? This process, this function, this department, right? And ultimately our company. It's a step change in improvements because it starts from a vision of the future, um, and not necessarily the current operating state. So purgatory, right? Here's evidence of what happens when organizations skip, right? That systematic review of their processes. MIT's project, Nanda published the Gen AI 2025. It was almost about a year ago, and they analyzed more than 300 public AI deployments, 52 structured interviews, and 153 leadership surveys. The finding was pretty sobering. I think almost everybody has heard this one by now, but we have a 95% failure rate that the technology 95 failure rate. Technology isn't the problem. The underlying technology works. The failure rate is a capacity building problem, right? The pilots succeed at the pilot level and fail at scale because scaling requires the people capacity, right? That the organization has not built. A frontier model relationship with the organization wasn't committed to, and the process baselining, right, has not been well defined, right? So is the easy part, right? That's in that greenfield environment, pristine environment. Once you put it out into the wild, which is often brownfield, where you're dealing with technical debt, operational debt, right? That's where it gets messy, and it tends to scaling is really the hard part. I'm going to blow these slides pretty quickly, but we have three culprits of pilot AI only, process only mode, and the people only mode. We're going to go through this here quickly here. So how do we get around this? How do we actually deploy this within the organization, right? How does the work actually get done inside of a real organization? And the operating model has three roles that run concurrently throughout every engagement or every AI initiative. And so first we have the leadership owns the strategic frame and the visible daily practice. The leadership without visible AI practice produces cynicism, right? So if they're not actually using the tool themselves and talking about how it's being applied to their everyday use and how they plan to use it within the company, you're going to have cynicism, across the ranks. So leadership with visible produce organizational permission. It makes it okay to use and apply, right? So it yields organizational permission. Lab, this is your small dedicated team that holds the technical depth and the experimental infrastructure. They evaluate the frontier models. They're constantly evaluating the frontier model that you pick. They're evaluating the capabilities that seem to be coming out on a daily and weekly basis and how it could be applied and within your organization and distributed out to your workforce. They build the integration layer, right? They run structured experiments. They produce the playbook that the rest of the organizations will use, and they yield scalable playbooks or scalable environment that then your crowd, your broader workforce will be able to work within. And you're in essence crowdsourcing the AI capabilities for your organization because you want to tap the collective intelligence of your organization on how AI can be used at every level, right? So that's your broader workforce is the crowd. And this is where the use case discovery happens closest to the actual work. Your people closest to the customers, to the operations, to the production floor, they see opportunities that no centralized team can see from a distance or the leadership can see. Right? And the the yield or the outcome is a compounding of AI use and application within your organization. So the roles hold each other accountable. Leadership can't delegate the AI evolution to the lab, and the lab can't impose experiments on the crowd. And the crowd can't operate without strategic frame of the leadership and the technical scaffolding that the lab provides, right? So it becomes one integrated model that has to be in place, each with their own equal part, right? So the steps to scale here: educational infrastructure is the scaffolding that turns into enterprise capabilities, right? So first is the universal AI literacy for every employee. Base tool navigation, you set governance early, the safety guardrails early, and this is the foundation that makes every subsequent stage possible. Then we get into piloting, right? Structured experimental with departmental specific use cases. We have safe permission. You're creating that environment where it's safe to fail and share lessons learned, right? And iterate. And this is where the fast movers lead, the show me members watch and start joining, and then the peer attributed wins begin to accumulate, right? And the last is scaling, advanced capability for AI champions and co-intelligence leaders. The organization identifies the people building co-intelligence and invests in them as accelerators who can compound that capability and make it visible for everybody else. So access without infrastructure produces pilot purgatory. Infrastructure without access produces theory without practice. And methodology builds both, right? In parallel and at the depth the equation requires. And so here it is, your people, technology, and process evaluated as integrated system, three gears, one bridge, and the bridge is what connects your current state to the destination for your breakthrough goals. And the methodology was built on one insight. Three dimensions are not independent, they're multiplicative, and any dimension taken to zero collapses that equation. All three dimensions built to depth produce that collective co-intelligence that crosses the deployment gap. So in session 3, 2 weeks from now, we're going to go very deep into the AI maturity journey at the individual level. Tool user to thought partner to co-intelligence, and what's organizations that plateau from organizations realizing a true AI evolution. So where your team currently sits on that progression, we're going to talk about where your team currently is in that progression and what they need to do to advance the next level. And then in section 4, we're going to bring everything together in the full 4-phase AI accelerated operating: the AI examine, the AI explore, the AI execute, and the AI expand. So that's the diagnosis to continuous evolution. So you'll be walking away with a plan that you can take back to your leadership and your organizational team and really move the needle. We're down to 5 minutes. My apologies, it ran a little bit longer here, but before we move over to the Q&A, I want to give us an opportunity to connect, right? If you want to close the deployment gap inside your organization, just take a scan of that QR code. That's the fastest way to get in touch with me directly. I'm going to leave it up here for about a minute, so you can grab a snapshot or hit that QR code, save my contact information, and feel free to reach out outside of these sessions anytime you'd like. Okay, we're at 11:55. I'm about 10 minutes over. I'm willing to stay on a little bit longer if you are to answer, any additional questions. The last time we just stayed an extra half hour or so. So I'm going to turn that off and bring it back to me here. And if we have any questions, we can start doing the Q&A right now. Well, of course, I got my voices echoing, I guess, throughout the whole session. That would have been awful. We have quite a few people here, so you stuck around with me here. Okay, we have one from my buddy Jim Mackesy. Good to hear from you, buddy. In an earlier slide, you outlined that if it disappeared and the company process breaks down, that equated to overdependence, which equates to atrophy. I've read about AI first, where I've seen the opposite stated, where they say that if you are properly re-engineering the new processes, you should not just layer AI on top. You should design new processes with AI at the center. What are your thoughts on this? So that was 11:53. So I think we answered that question by saying, it's that whole paving the cow path, right? And that you don't want to be layering on top of existing tired old processes. Is that once you have that co-intelligence in place, the idea is that you're going to be applying the new technology in ways that were never possible before, right? And so there is going to be kind of more of the cognitive drudgery and some more kind of rote activities associated with that. They're going to be care of by the platform, and a dedicated to more creative and strategic level type activities. AI literacy, any trainings or courses you recommend to get everyone started? So I would say the cheap and easy way is definitely you would definitely want to. YouTube really has it's been really great for me personally. I'll tell you flat out. I just watch and listen to nowadays is YouTube videos. I had mentioned before about using the tools to help you learn AI. So some of the things that you can do on your own. Of course, it offers training services. So if that's something, assume you're talking about for self study. There's more than enough there. And again, to ask AI how you can use AI more effectively is probably the best way to go about it. If you have an organization or teams that you like to get together, moving through that AI maturity model of full user thought pro intelligence, we at AIX definitely have curriculum established for that. I have a question. Presentation, AI is most effective for analyzing financial statements and turning raw data into meaningful decision-ready insights. So, Mark, I'm a little biased in this, but I'd say that Claude is unbelievable when it comes to analyzing financial data and crunching information like that. They've done a wonderful job of creating hooks and integrations with tools like Microsoft's Excel and actually even with Google. They are enterprise first. That's what they went to market with. We're really starting to see it now that they are building a whole infrastructure geared towards that type of work. So I would recommend Claude, and they actually have a plugin that goes right into Excel now. You have Claude sitting inside the application to make it real easy for you. So hopefully that was helpful. This slide was moving employees from literacy to the next level is spot on. How do you make that happen? What do you need to do? This slide was intriguing. So I don't know what slide that was, Marianne. If you can maybe get back to me on that, I'll answer the question. Can you share a framework or articles for safety guardrails and how to think about that? What I can do is off the top of my head, we have people on staff that could this like an heartbeat. But what I can do is get back to you, Sid, on that. I'll even um, post it as a LinkedIn or get everybody who's attending the meeting here for that. But there are several frameworks and articles for safety guardrails. That's a major issue and one that I didn't touch upon. Those is more kind of theoretical in the approach you need to have and when you're rolling this out in your organization. As you start getting into each one of the steps and methodology, there is a tremendous amount around governance and security and those sorts of things. So I agree, but I need to hear my Copilot felt weak. Chat worked okay, but Claude seems to feel the most CEO like when working with Excel. Thanks for answering. Yep. So it looks like you're already using Excel and Claude. Mark, good move there. That was the slide. AI literacy was the first step. AI exploring the second. Okay. All right. So there was a question about providing for the first session. We have a YouTube channel that has been that's up and running that have these recorded and post them up onto YouTube. So you'll have access to that. Again, we're going to follow with a link to that channel so you'll have access. All right, so we are down. I got a couple of thank yous here, so I appreciate that. But we are at 12:02, and if we do not have any more questions, I will close the event, and I will all for attending and spending a little bit over an hour with me. I hope you found it valuable, and do hope to hear from you in the meantime. Two, we're going to have our third session. It is the AI maturity model, and it's going to be a little bit more prescriptive. And we're going to have some really great things in there for you as an individual practitioner to take home and use on your own. So again, I want to thank all of you for attending and your support and contributions to this. The questions were great, and have a fantastic weekend and next couple of weeks, and we'll be in touch real soon. Again, hopefully you looked us up on that QR code. Feel free to me if you have any questions or concerns. Thanks again, and have a great day.